Today, we're going to look at a single project, but through two completely different lenses. We're digging into how the job of a test manager totally changes depending on the path a software project takes, and we're pulling our insights straight from the ISTQB's advanced level syllabus on test management. So let's start with a big question. When you're building software, what's the better move? Is it having a super detailed blueprint where every single step is planned out before you even start? Or is it more like having a destination, a starting point, and a map that you get to explore along the way, adapting as you learn new things? Here's a quick look at our game plan for this explainer. We'll start by defining these two paths, check out the specific models they represent, and then we'll dive into a head-to-head comparison of a test manager's playbook for each. After that, we'll tackle some key questions, and finally, wrap up by looking at the hybrid reality of how software gets built today. All right, let's get right into it and unpack that core idea we just mentioned, the blueprint versus the journey. What does that actually mean when you're the one managing the testing? Okay, so on one hand, you've got the blueprint. This is the world of sequential development. Seriously, think about building a huge skyscraper. You've got to have that complete, perfect architectural plan before anyone even thinks about digging a hole. It's all about being predictable, structured, and you have to finish each phase completely before you can even start the next one. But on the other side, you've got the journey. This is your iterative, your agile approach. Here, you have a final goal in mind. Let's say it's reaching a mountain summit. But the exact path, well, that gets discovered in stages. You're constantly adapting to the terrain, to the weather as you go. It's all about being flexible and responding to change. So let's put some real names to these big ideas. What do these models actually look like out there in the wild, in the world of software development? A classic example of that blueprint approach is the V model. Here, everything flows in a really strict sequence. You get your requirements, then you do your design, then the coding, and only after all that do you move into these very distinct testing phases. It's super linear. You finish one stage, lock it down, and then move on to the next. And then for the journey approach, the perfect example is Scrum. With Scrum, the project isn't one long, drawn-out sequence. Nope, it's broken down into these small, repeatable cycles. You've probably heard them called sprints or iterations. At the end of each short cycle, maybe 2 weeks long, the team delivers a small but actually functional piece of the final product. And this is huge because it allows for constant feedback and course correction. It's designed to be dynamic and adaptive from the ground up. Okay, so we've met the two different philosophies. Now for the main event. How does a test manager's entire job, their planning, their reporting, their metrics, the whole shebang, completely get turned on its head depending on which path the project is on? Just take a look at this table. It lays out the differences so clearly. In that sequential world, planning is this huge, formal thing you do right at the beginning, where you try to predict absolutely everything. But in the iterative world, planning is a continuous, bite-sized thing that happens every couple of weeks. And that fundamental shift from let's predict everything now to let's plan just enough for the next little bit, it echoes through every single part of the job. Let's zoom in on monitoring for a second. In that V-model world, a test manager's reporting is all tied to these major milestones. You're creating these big, comprehensive status reports at the end of a long phase. It's a very formal, pretty heavyweight process that's designed to give a big snapshot of quality at these key points you decided on months ago. Now, compare that to the iterative world of Scrum. Reporting isn't some big event that happens once in a while. It's a constant live stream of information. You've got daily status updates, live dashboards that anyone on the team can look at anytime, and those awesome burn-down charts that visually show you exactly how much work is left. The entire focus shifts to providing immediate, real-time feedback so the team can adapt today, not a month from now. This means that the very definition of progress is measured differently. And this is so crucial. In a sequential project, a test manager is tracking traditional stuff. What percentage of our planned tests have we run? But in an iterative project, you add agile-specific metrics like team velocity. And velocity is a big one. It's not about how busy people are. It's a measure of how much working software the team can consistently deliver in an iteration. And that is so powerful because it lets you make really reliable forecasts about the future, which is something that's just incredibly difficult to do with the old-school metrics alone. All right, let's try to put all this together by tackling some of the most common questions that come up when you start comparing these models. This is the natural question, right? You see these two really different ways of doing things, and you just have to ask, okay, so which one's actually better? And the answer is, Well, it's neither of them. It's not about one being better than the other. It's all about picking the right tool for the right job. For a project with super stable, well-understood requirements, maybe some high-stakes regulations, think medical device software, the predictability of a sequential model could be absolutely perfect. But for a brand new app where the market is changing by the second, that flexibility of an iterative model is completely essential. The real key here is alignment, aligning your model with the reality of the project. So if it's not about trying to pick a winner, then what is the single most important thing a test manager needs to take away from all this? The ISTQB's syllabus itself gives us the perfect answer. It all boils down to this. A test manager's number one job isn't to force one testing process onto every single project. It's to first understand the development model being used, and then to skillfully tailor and align all the testing activities, your planning, your monitoring, your metrics, to fit that model like a glove. Your real value isn't in having a rigid process. It's in your adaptability. But let's be real. In the real world, things are rarely so black and white. It's not always just the blueprint or just the journey. A lot of the time, those two paths actually start to merge. And that brings us to the hybrid model. And it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a practical approach that blends elements from both the sequential and the agile worlds. So you might use a sequential blueprint-style approach for that initial high-level planning, but then switch over to agile, iterative cycles for the actual development and testing. So why would you mix and match like this? Well, it happens for some really practical reasons. Sometimes a big traditional company might use a hybrid model as kind of a stepping stone to become more agile without, causing total chaos. It's also perfect for those really complex projects that need the best of both worlds, like the rigorous upfront safety planning of a sequential model for a critical component, but combined with the speed and flexibility of agile for the user interface. And this really brings us to our final and I think most crucial takeaway. In a world where development is more and more hybrid, the most effective test managers are the ones who can be hybrid too. They know exactly when to pull a tool from the sequential playbook and when to use one from the iterative one. So it leaves us with a question for you to think about. Take a look at your own projects. If they're blending methods, is your test management approach adapting right along with them?